Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm here to give you guys day 3 of the Halloween movie review series, and today I'm going to be talking about Friday the 13th, Part 3. And this is kind of an interesting movie because this movie is pretty significant in the Friday the 13th franchise and kind of a little bit of a piece of history when it comes to horror movies. But before I actually talk about it, let me read the back um, of the movie, read the little info, so that way you could kind of have an idea of what this movie's about. An idyllic summer turns into a nightmare of unspeakable terror for yet another group of naive counselors. Ignoring Camp Crystal Lake's bloody legacy, one by one they fall victim to the um, maniacal Jason, who stalks them at every turn. Friday the 13th Part 3 will have you frozen with fear as Jason finds his way into your room. Now, this is obviously saying that because this movie was in 3D, and this was the first and only of the of the Friday the 13th movies to be released in 3D, and this was the second of Paramount Pictures movies to be released in 3D. The um, the other one was this was, I don't know if it was the second one, but it was the first one to be released in 3D since Javaro, which was um, made in 1954. So it had been, and this movie was released in 1982. So it had been, I think, a little over 30 years, I'm guessing, since Paramount Pictures released a 3D movie. And I'm just gonna kind of start off by just talking about this movie. So this movie kind of has a lot of unique history with it a little bit. Originally, this wasn't supposed to, the movie that we see here, it wasn't supposed to be the movie. Originally, earlier drafts were made for Ginny to return to the series, and she was going to be in a psychiatric hospital, and she was going to be suffering from the events of the last film, but um, Jason Voorhees ended up surviving, and she would track her down and kill her at the hospital and murder the staffs and patients. Um, but it wasn't made because um, Amy Steele, who played Ginny in the last film, turned down the role because she was working on another project, so they had to change the script. And um, Juan Kurz was offered to write this film, but he turned the project down as well. So, husband and wife screening duo Moulton, um, Kurt Roser, and Carl Watson were instead hired to do this, but um, they ended up bringing in. They completed the first draft, but then they brought in Petro Popscu, um, to alter the screenplay a little bit and make it more sinister in medicine. And he was kind of like an unnamed. He was kind of an uncredited person though to write this film. And I'm not I'm not gonna. This is the film where Jason gets his hockey mask. So I'm not really. I'll go into a little detail about how that was made. Um, you know, they had this idea saying that this was going to be his trademark, um, to make him more recognizable for popular culture, and obviously that was a success because when everyone sees Jason today, um, he is in his Friday the 13th mask. One thing I do want to talk about is it's kind of interesting. Would Jason have gotten his mask if the original film that was supposed to be made was made? Um, And I do kind of wonder too, if Friday the 13th would have gotten sued by John Carpenter and the people that made the Halloween series because um, Halloween 2 pretty much took place in a hospital too. So it's kind of interesting to see if how would that what would have happened. But I'm gonna talk about the actual film itself. So yes, this film was filmed in 3D. They had some issues though going in originally. Georgetown Productions, um, who had done the previous installments of the Friday the 13th series, agreed to be the distributor for this film and help him shoot the film with 3D cameras and stuff like that. And it went into a lot of work to make the film in 3D. They had to really do a good job of shooting scenes. It would take hours to set up the equipment. And um, but unfortunately, what ended up happening is as they were making this film, Georgetown Productions threatened to sue Paramount Pictures because they filed a $20 million lawsuit for allegedly for monopolizing the marketing of 3D exhibition materials. So Paramount Pictures decided to give Mark Polarized, who is who ran Georgetown Productions, um, credit for the film. So then he filed an injunction. Um, so what ended up happening is Paramount Pictures ended up having to change the equipment. But this film was actually shot in um, uh, um, this film was actually shot at a um, Values Art Movie Ranch in Saugus, California, and the house and the barn you see were all custom made, which I thought was pretty cool. Um, and it stayed up there until it was burnt down in 2012. And um, pretty much the whole film took place in California. Um, and I'm just gonna read the part where it talks about Jason's decision to read the for the hockey mask because I won't really be able to remember anything. So the decision to dress Jason Voorhees is in his now signature hockey mask occurred during a lighting check on set. The film's 3D effects supervision, Martin Sadoff was a hockey fan and supplied a Detroit Red Wings tender, goaltender. I'm sorry, not goaltender. Um, mask to Minor, who played. Minor loved the mask, but during test shots found it was too small. Using a technique called vacuum form, makeup effects director Doug White enlarged the mask and created a new mold to work with. After White finished the molds, art director Terry Ballard placed new red triangles on the mask to give it a unique appearance. Holes were also punched into the mask, and the markings were altered, making it different from Madoff's original template. There were two um, prosthetic face masks facing for Richard Booker, who plays Jason Voorhees in this movie, to wear underneath the hockey mask. One mask was composed of approximately 11 different appliances and took about 6 hours to apply to Booker's face. This mask was used for scenes where the hockey mask was removed. In the scenes where the hockey mask is over his face, a simple head mask was created. This one piece mask would simply slip on over Booker's head, exposing his face but not the rest of his head. So that kind of was a little bit of back history into Jason's hockey mask. And that's pretty much all the background history. I'm not going to go over how people were casted. I'll do that at the end. But let's talk about this actual movie itself. Well, let me actually first let me say who directed it and stuff like that. So this movie was directed by Steve Miner. He returned and directed this movie. It was produced by Frank um, Mansko Jr., who I think was new to this movie, and I already said who was written by, so I'm not really gonna talk about that. Um, it was based on it was based off the works of Victor Miller and Juan Kurz. The music was done by Harry Man Man um, Manfredi and Michael Zager. The cinematography was done by Gerald um, Fell. and it was edited by George Hively. The production company was Jason Inc. So I guess they got their own production company or something. And it was distributed by Paramount Pictures. And this movie actually was released itself on August 13th, 1982. So I believe this was released on a Friday the 13th. And the movie had a budget of $2.3 million, and that's pretty much um the entire history of that stuff. I'll go over the box office and stuff afterwards. But let's talk about the film itself. The film opens up with showing the events of the ending of the last film, minus the part when Jason jumps through the window. Um, I was alright with them showing it the first time, but I don't know why they needed to show it this time and this in depth. I thought it was a little bit ridiculous, honestly. Um, it was and it was just filler. But then it shows a day later, um, um, at a um, at a lakefront store. Um, yeah, it shows a day later at a lakefront store. We meet this couple, Edna and Harold, and pretty much they look like the very low class people. And Edna is watching the news. Well, actually, no. First, Harold comes over and like almost knocks all those clothes down that Edna had watched, and she gets pissed about this. And Edna was watching the news on everything that happened in the last film, and it reports 8 deaths, and they never include Paul's death, so we don't exactly ever really find out what happens to Paul. I still think that's very weird. Um, and what ends up, you know, Edna then thinks that she sees Paul out there, but it's actually Jason. He's creeping around um, the creeping around where the clothes, like the clothesline, and we see that he's had a change of clothes, which is the clothes that he wears now. And Edna starts taking the clothes down, and she still thinks she sees Jason again, and um, lifts over one of the clothes, but nobody's there. And then um, Harold is pretty much a foodie. He likes to eat a lot of food, and he needs to lose weight because he's really fat. And there's a bunny that ends up getting into the and we also saw that the barn door there was open too. That's kind of becomes important. Um, and he grabs a bunny and doesn't want his wife to see it because she'll make it out. She'll turn it into a fur coat. But yeah, he pretty much is a fat ass. He he eats his entire store inventory pretty much. He eats nuts, um, and he drinks the drinks that are there, and he eats the donuts. And he doesn't even like keep it for himself. He actually puts the stuff back, which isn't very sanitary, but whatever. And his wife, Edna, catches him, and she gets pissed at him, but he still eats it anyways. And then he goes to put the bunny back in the barn and see that one of his bunnies has just been absolutely murdered. We see the dead carcass of it, and we find out that it was done by a snake. And this ends up scaring the crap out of Harold, and he wants to take a crap, and then he's in the bathroom, and he thinks he overhears something, and he gets up, and he doesn't wipe his ass after he just took a crap, which kind of, which I remember that becomes a common theme in the Friday the 13th series. I guess though, if you think you hear something, you that would be like the common theme, but I just thought that was really weird. And um, then um, he's looking over all over around where trying to find um who's making all this noise, and then he opens one of the door, and Jason pops up with a meat cleaver and stat and kills um Harold in the chest with it. And then later on, Edna, earlier she didn't know what she was knitting, and she couldn't find one of her knitting needles, and she doesn't hear Harold come out and She doesn't hear anything for a while, and then she gets spooked by a mouse or a rat. I forget what it was, and Jason then stabs her through the door with a sewing needle. I thought that was a actually no, stabs her in the back of the head. I'm sorry, which I thought was a nice scene. And then afterwards, they didn't really go how long um the events from this took place from the next scene. They didn't really say. Um, but something I think it was not long afterwards though, because later on the main cast drives past it, so there's that. I didn't really mind this scene too much. It didn't really fit the whole movie. You probably didn't really need this scene really all that much, but I just kind of thought it was a nice way to open up the movie to kind of get some kills in there and see Jason murder people. So we meet, yeah, we meet the main cast. We meet Chris Higgins, um, her best friend Debbie, and Andy, Debbie's boyfriend, and they're trying to get, they're trying to pick up Shelly, and who is Andy's roommate, and he's very nerdy, very socially awkward. And that kind of becomes a common theme throughout this movie. So he pretends to scare people. He was dressed up like some sort of horror movie killer, like about to kill them, but nothing happens. And Chris Higgins, and they're going to Higgins Haven, and then they go get um, Vera Sanchez, and I liked this scene a lot actually. Um, Vera Sanchez, um, you know, um, Andy got Shelly a date with her, and Vera Sanchez doesn't really seem too amused by Shelly. And then they see that, and Mrs. Sanchez didn't want um, Andy going to Vera going to Haven's um, Haven's um, Higgins Haven. I'm sorry, I almost called it the wrong thing. Um, but then they see that the van's smoking, thinking that it's on fire, but really it's Chuck and Chili who are smoking pot, because we find out that they're huge stoners in the movie, which I thought was kind of an interesting characters to have. Um, and everybody's driving towards the to Higgins Haven. And what I liked about this is the police start to show up, and they were smoking pot in the van, and they are trying to do everything they can to put it out and hide it, and they end up eating it. Um, and they pull over because they think the cops are coming after them, but really the cops were just going right by them. Um, and then they see, and Chris gets distracted and sees that the murder's done of Harold and Edna, and this ties in later because she's like very concerned about this. Um, then they arrive at Higgins Haven, and we see somebody watching through the door, thinking that it's Jason. Now, I forgot to mention that this scene is in 3D, so they've been showing things like when there was kids playing baseball, and the baseball bat was like right pointed at the screen. Um, I think that's the only thing that happened. So that was the only 3D thing that really happened thus far. Um, and then what happens next? Um, Chris brings her bag in the house while everybody else goes to the beach, and she gets worried because the door's already open. And who comes up? None other than Rick, her boyfriend, who she hasn't seen in 2 months. Um, and Chris and Rick are happy to see each other, and Chris hadn't been there in a couple of years. Um, and we find out why later on, that she wanted to come back because she wanted to be brave, and she's kind of rejecting Rick a little bit. Um, Kind of wanted to take things slow and get to know him again. And then she Rick gives her a piggyback ride to the van so they could go get everybody else's stuff. And Rick makes a joke saying that she's put on more weight than he last saw her, which is really something you shouldn't say to a girl, but whatever. And then the next scene is what's the next scene actually? I don't remember. Um, the next scene I think the next scene was we heard somebody scream, and yeah, was that the next scene? Yeah, we hear somebody scream. Everybody runs into the house, and we see Chris is just very worried about what it is. And then when she opens the door, she sees that Shelly has been stabbed and killed. And everybody's really concerned about this. And Andy goes to touch him, and then we find out that it's a prank. And he actually had a fake hair on that had an axe chopped through it, and he was using fake blood. And everybody gets pissed at him, which I didn't really get. I did like Shelly's line because Shelly was suspicious when they came back to get the stuff that the van door was open because it was closed when she left, and Shelly was in there because he went to get this box of stuff that he has, and says that they're going skinny dipping, but I'm not skinny enough. I don't know if he actually didn't know what the concept of skinny dipping was, or if he just didn't want to go skinny dipping because he was embarrassed about what he looked like. But I thought that line was hilarious. Um, and then Chris thinks that she sees somebody in the phone, which is Jason, so she was actually correct. Um, and then she shows Debbie her new bed, and then she actually has to sleep in a hammock, which I would actually kind of like to sleep in a hammock for one night. I think that'd be kind of cool. And Andy's kind of surprised about this because Debbie and Andy plan on having sex, and they don't really know how they're gonna be able to do it in a hammock. Um, so then Shelly and um, Debbie talks to Chris, and we find out that Chris went through some type of dramatic experience when she was there before. So they kind of keep alluding to that, and she's upset that Rick's being so distant from her, and that she's being so distant from Rick because earlier when Rick was pulling hay up into the bone, um, you know, yeah, when Chris was pulling hay up into the bone, um, he was talking about how he was gonna marry some sort of beautiful girl, and Chris said that she should have murdered her, and you could see that Chris is very um, southern, which I thought was kind of funny, um, and um, then I'm sorry, I was just trying to read my notes, and then so Debbie said that he just doesn't understand why you're being so distant, so that kind of is like a little plot hole to kind of make us think what dramatic experience Chris could have possibly went through. So then, um, v- Vera, I don't know if that's how you say her name, and Shelly go to the store, and Vera doesn't have enough money to pay, so he has Shelly throw his wallet over to her, and when he threw the wallet, it went right to the screen since it's 3D, and that just looked ridiculous. Um, and Vera goes to grab the wallet, and then somebody else beats her to it, and we find out that it was um, this street thug biker game. I wouldn't say a biker game, but these bikers, and we find out their names are Ali, Fox, and Loco, and um, they pretty much intimidated him. They Fox takes the wallet and taunts her with it, and Ali and Loco hold Shelly so he can't do anything about it. And Loco, sorry, not Loco, Fox forces Vera to ask politely for the wallet, and she does. Um, and then they get in the car, and Shelly feels bad that he didn't stick up for her, so he says, next time a situation like that happens, I'm going to stick up for you. And then Shelly accidentally runs over their motorcycles, and um, Ali sees this happen, and he gets pissed about it. He has a chain wrapped around his fist, and he punches through the windshield, and then he punches through the window. Um, and then Shelly drives away, and he just doesn't want to take this anymore. So then he runs over the motorcycle again, and then drives away. Because Ali was going to chase him with the motorcycle, which um, really he didn't do any damage to the motorcycle. So I don't know why he was so pissed about it. It didn't really make any sense to me, but whatever. And then what happens is they go back to camp, and Andy and Debbie are hanging out, and Andy yet again is using a yo-yo, and the yo-yo is going right towards the screen because it's in 3D. Um, and they go swimming, and Rick wants to leave because his car's been smashed. Chris is being distant with him, so he doesn't have a reason to want to stay. But Chris wants him to stay, so this makes him want to stay, and they go off and do their own thing. And I'll talk about what they do in a little bit later. I'm just going to talk about the next scene because it kind of coincides with this. So then what happens is Ali, Fox, and Loco pull up, and they want to get revenge for Shelly running over their motorcycles. And they pretty much drain all the gas out of the van that they have, and they were gonna light the barn on fire. Now, we find out that they have a barn and all this hay and um, stalls and stuff like that because Chris's father said she's planning on buying a horse, which doesn't make any sense to me because why would you build this barn, buy all this hay, buy all the stalls, if you're not going to buy a horse? You could say, well, a horse costs a lot of money, but if you're willing to bone all this hay, and he even has like you see like riding stuff like saddles and stuff like that. Why would you buy a saddle if you don't have a horse? That didn't really make any sense to me. That pissed me off. Um, or whatever. So, um, Fox doesn't want to do this, but she just kind of goes along with the ride, and then she sees Jason in the bone and goes in the bone, and she goes up to the second floor of the bone and swings on the rope that pulls the hay up, and Loco is pissed that she's goofing around, and then when he doesn't see her anymore, she thinks he's playing a joke on him, so he goes to look for her because he has the gasoline ready to set the bone on fire, and um when he goes up to the second floor, we see that Fox has been stabbed through the throat with a pitchfork, and um, like prunned up against the one of the support beams of the bone. And I thought that was a nice scene. But like I said, since it's in 3D, they have the pitchfork going right towards the screen. So yeah. Um, so Loco gets pretty scared about this, and then Jason pops up and stabs Loco in the ribs or in the gut with the pitchfork. Um, and Ali doesn't hear from them for a while, so he goes into the bone to investigate to see what's happening with them. And um, then what happens is he gets concerned and he sees Jason, so he grabs a weapon to defend himself. But then Jason ends up, um, beating him repeatedly with a pipe wrench. And he beats him unconscious. Um, and then that was that scene. I like this scene. I thought it was a nice scene. But there's something I hate about it, which will come into effect later on in the film. And then I'm going to just talk about everything that went on with Chris and Rick while they were gone from the camp. Rick's upset that Chris is being so distant with him, and he just doesn't understand it. So Chris tells him why she's being so distant with him. I think because he wanted her to understand. She wanted him to understand it. So he talks about what happened 2 years ago, how he brought her home late from being out, and the parents were really worried about him, but she didn't care because she was having the time of her life. And um, then when they came home, her and her parents had a huge fight, and her mother slapped her, and she ran away and was so upset because she was distraught that her mother would hit her. So she wanted to make her parents worried about her by getting lost. Um, so it's she ran into the woods, but then it started to rain, so she went under a tree so she couldn't get wet, and she ended up falling asleep. And then she started to hear footprints and crackling. Um, and she thinks it's her parents, but then she sees this man with this grotesque face um, pop up and try to attack her. And she was he tried to kill her with a machete, um, but she ended up kicking it away out of her hands. But she tried everything she could to try to get away, but it was to no avail. Jason ended up dragging her, and then she said she blacked out, and somehow she woke up the next day in her bed, and she didn't know how, um, but her parents act like the situation didn't happen when it did happen because to her it feels like, you know, um, it's happening right at the moment, and she's pretty much been haunted from this, and that's why she feels like she has to come back to um, Higgins Haven because she wants to prove that she's really brave and can handle being back. Now, obviously, we pretty much know that this person was Jason, but she doesn't know that because she's never met Jason before. But I kind of like this because this was the first time that any characters from the Friday the 13th series had some sort of tie-in with the killer, and it kind of, you know, made you invested in the story. Um, and then, um, you know, Rick tries to comfort her, but then his battery to his car dies, so they have to walk back to camp. And then they walk back, and um, Chris thinks that she hears some type of commotion go down, but then she realizes that it's nothing. And then there's all the scenes that took place actually at um, at Higgins Haven while they were gone. But what I liked about this scene is as Chris was telling the story, it didn't. It would show her telling the story, but also the situations of it happening. But kind of it would fade into that situation. And it didn't show everything. It just kind of showed Jason attacking her. But I really enjoyed it. So, um, Shelly and Andy are having a juggling contest, but Andy purposely loses so he can go have sex with Debbie, and they have sex on the hammock, and then Shelly wants to um do something more with Vera, but Vera isn't interested. But she said she'll go outside and talk. Um, and then Chuck goes to the bathroom, and Jason pops up and tries to tip the stall over, but then he stops, and then Chuck comes out, doesn't wipe his ass again, which was awful, and gets scared by Chili, and Chili thinks that it's she sees Jason walk into the bone, and she thinks it's just um Shelly messing with them again. So they go in the bone, but Chuck kind of has a suspicion that it's not Shelly. So they go into the bone, and Jason walks out one of the stalls, and they don't end up dying. They pretty much, you know, go back in the house like nothing happened. And then Vera is by the water, and somebody grabs her by the leg and hand, and as if she's trying to pull her into the water. We see somebody pop out with a hockey mask and a spear gun, and we find out that it's just Shelly pranking her again. And Shelly says the line, you know what they say, pretty girls shouldn't go out by themselves in the dark. And Vera gets pissed about this because Shelly's just acting like a jerk, scaring people. And Shelly says that he just wants Vera to like her, and this is just kind of his way of trying to impress her. And I really like this because I kind of like that this gave Shelly some type of character. you actually were invested in his character. So I really liked this. I liked this scene a lot. So Shelly's sitting down all depressed, but then he sees somebody in the bone, and then he goes into the bone and is wondering who it is. But then um, Vera ends up dropping Shelly's wallet into the water, so she goes to get it, and then we see Jason walk up with Shelly's hockey mask on. So this is when Jason gets his hockey mask, and Vera thinks at first that it's Shelly and apologizes for dropping his wallet in the water, but then when she sees that it's not Shelly because he's more taller and muscular, um, and she sees and Jason points the spear gun and shoots her right through the eye with it. I thought this was actually a really good kill. Um, and then Jason goes into the house, and Debbie goes to take a shower, and Andy's able to do handstands. Um, so he goes to get her and Debbie a beer, and then as he's doing the handstand, Jason kills him with the machete, which I actually thought was a good scene, but it was like, why was this guy doing a handstand in the house? Because had he not done this handstand, he could have fought him off, and it's just he was just showing off, and I didn't like it. Um, so Debbie gets concerned when she doesn't hear from him. She doesn't hear from um, Andy for a while, so she lays in or in the hammock. I was gonna say in bed, but that's not in a bed. And she reads. I did like how they had a Godzilla reference in there. How they talked about how Godzilla's been going on for 25 years when she was reading it in a magazine, and blood starts to drip down from the wall, and she looks up and sees that Andy has been murdered, and then Jason stabs her through the throat with the um, with with the machete, um, and I liked it. It was pretty much the same scene that his mom did to I forget his name in the first movie where he stabbed the guy through the neck, through the throat with through the bed. So I like that scene. And you can see that this is where Jason kind of starts to get a little bit supernatural. He's got a ton of strength, but he's not completely invincible yet. So I liked this. And then Chuck and Chili. Chuck's making popcorn, and the popcorn starts going right at the screen because it's in 3D. And they get worried when the power goes out, so Chuck's gonna go fix the electricity, and he gets it working. And Jason then Jason pops up and throws him into the electric box, and he gets electrocuted. Um, and then as this is happening, um, Chili sees Chili sees Andy come in and his throat's all slit. And I like that we didn't actually see not Andy, I'm sorry, I messed up the name. Shelly come in. And I liked this scene because we didn't actually see Shelly get killed off, and I thought this really worked, even though we knew he really was dead. I liked this scene because Shelly was crying wolf pretty much the whole time, but pretending to be dead. And this time he actually really was like dying. But she thought he was pranking her again. But then when she touches Shelly, um, she realizes that it's real blood in her hand, so she starts freaking out. And oh my gosh, her acting here was ridiculously over the top, though. She was like, oh my god, oh my god. It was just really, really bad. Um, it was just she was just completely freaking out. Um, and then Jason pops over with a hot fire poker and stabs her right through the stomach with it. I thought that was a nice scene. And then Chris and Rick come back, and they think something's wrong because the power's gone off and everything. They think either their friends left them, but then they realize something is wrong when when Chris goes in the bathroom and sees that you know um, sees I forget who it was, but somebody's clothes in the water, and there's like blood in there too. And Rick goes to get the power working again. So Chris opens the door to find him, and tries to call out and see if she needs help. And when we see Jason has a hold of Rick, and he's covering his mouth shut so he can't respond. What was goofy about this was had she had walked a few more feet, um, or at least walked off the steps, she would have seen Jason. So I thought that was a little goofy, um, because she pretty much just left her boyfriend out there to die. And when he didn't respond, she just was like, just gonna go back in the house. I thought that was a little goofy. But then when she goes back in the house, Jason squeezes um, Shelly's head and his eyeballs pop out. And that looked really cool. And since it was in 3D, it popped out right at the screen. There was a scene I forgot to talk about in the beginning of the film, where Chris was about to run over this crazy guy named Abel, who was warning him to stay away from this, and he had like a real eyeball. And this scene made me want to bring that up. And then Chris starts to get really worried when nobody's around, and she goes outside to look for everybody, and Loco, who I guess was hanging from a tree, pops down, and this freaks her out. And then Jason, she barricades the door and stuff like that, and then Jason throws um Rick's dead carcass through the window and pops right and through it. um and Chris closes the door and kind of like locks it and stuff to prevent Jason from getting in. But and she goes upstairs and hides in one of the rooms. But then I think she sees Debbie's dead body upstairs, and she starts screaming, and this gives away her location. And she sees that Debbie has a knife stabbed right in the back of her head. And when Jason opens the door, um, or tries to, well, he breaks in with a axe, and when he opens the door, um, Chris stabs him in the hand with the machete and then stabs him in the leg. And she tries to escape through another door, but Jason throws the knife at her, but she is able to open the door before the knife hits her, which I thought was a nice scene. And then she runs away some more. She runs downstairs, and she sees Jason coming downstairs. I thought it was kind of like unrealistic that she would look in the room, because if you're like if a killer's chasing you, you're just gonna keep going. You're not gonna look in the house and see if the killer's still gonna go after you. But then she goes in the van, and she drives away. But because Loco, Ali, and Fox drained all the gas out, not all of it, but most of the gas out, she doesn't get very far. Um, Actually, I forgot to mention. And I forgot to mention before this too. When Jason went to go outside the door, this is why she looked. She hit Jason with a log, and he fell off the deck and nearly broke it. And when she was driving away, Jason nearly gets run over and jumps out of the way, which I thought looked cool. And I noticed Jason was still kind of a little bit human, because he would actually make grunted noise and stuff like that and go ooh when he would get hit. So it kind of shows that Jason was still a little bit human. But when the car runs out of gas, Jason is able to catch up to Chris. He tries to reach his hand in through the window, but she cranks it up, and his hands get stuck, and she runs away, and Jason headbutts the window and breaks it. And he continues to chase Chris, and Chris runs into the bone, and Jason locks it, and we don't really know what Chris is, but then we find out she's hidden from one of the support beams of the bone, and Jason's looking all over for her. And she falls right on top of Jason. I don't know if she did this on purpose or what. It looked like to me she did, which wasn't very smart, because she should have just stayed up there, but whatever. Um, and she continuously runs away from Jason, and she goes up to the second floor and puts a stack of hay up there, and she grabs a shovel. And when Jason goes up there, she hits Jason with it. Then she hangs him from the bone, and I did kind of like how like the music stopped and the movie went completely quiet when Jason was hung, thinking that the movie was over. But then the movie wasn't over. She opens the bone and sees that Jason's still alive, and Jason can't get free, so he has to take his mask off to get free. And when Jason takes his mask off, um, she she realizes that this is the same guy that attacked her 2 years ago. Um, and I liked this because it all connected. And Jason tries to go after Chris again, but who comes out of nowhere? None other than um, Ali, which just made no sense. I guess this guy, Jason didn't kill this guy. I guess Jason thought he did, but that just didn't. I thought that was just really stupid for him to come back, especially because um, while he distracted Jason, he just ended up getting killed anyway. So why not just kill him earlier? This was just really stupid. So Jason cuts his hand off and kills him again, pretty much. Um, and then um, Chris gets an axe and kills Jason right in the mask with it. And stabs Jason in the mask with it. And you can kind of see Jason kind of started to become a little bit more unhuman-like because when he gets stabbed with the mask, he reaches out his arms and continues to walk toward her like Frankenstein um, to try to get her, but then he ends up just dying. And Chris is relieved that she's free, that she's safe, and she rides on a boat. And the next day, like the littlest things are freaking her out, but she thinks everything's fine. But then sees Jason, who has his mask off, watching her from the boat and wanted to go get her. And Jason runs out, and she starts to get really freaked out. But then when she looks, she sees like Jason's not there. And then Pamela Voorhees pulls her into the water, and we find out that it's a nightmare. Um, which I actually did kind of like this scene. I thought it was kind of a nice callback to the end of the first film, and then the cops arrive, and Chris is just traumatized from these events, and the cops put Chris in the car and they leave, and Chris is freaking out, and the police officer's trying to calm her down. And the last thing we see before the movie goes off the air is Jason still um dead. Um, Jason's body still dead with the axe through his head. And then that was the end of the movie. One thing I didn't like about the movie is when the movie opened after they showed the scenes from the second film, um, they played this weird disco music that didn't fit the Friday the 13th franchise at all. I thought that was stupid. But then that was pretty much the end of the movie. I gotta say, I thought this was a decent movie. Um, if I had to give this a letter grade, um, I would give it. I don't think it's quite as good as the second one. What hurts this movie for me is the acting. I think some of the acting was pretty bad in this movie, like Chili's um, and Chuck's wasn't that good. Some of the characters were kind of really weird. Um, so some of the acting hurts this movie, but I did like the scene where the movie was shot and stuff like that. I liked Shelley's character, and I kind of wish he had kind of been the focal point of this movie. I did like Chris's character. Um, I thought it was fine. It wasn't anything great or anything, but I thought it was fine. Um, and but yeah, I liked it. Um, but it also had some really weird scenes and just had characters that you really wouldn't remember. Um, and I thought the 3D just made this movie look a little bit ridiculous with the way, like, there was even a scene where Andy's playing with a yo-yo and it just goes right towards the scene. It just looked really. I didn't really like the 3D effects that took place in this movie. I thought it kind of hurt the movie a little bit. Um, and it's, but other than that though, and there is some goofy stuff that takes place in this movie. But other than that, I think this movie is pretty decent. Um, some critics hate this movie, but I found that the critics really don't seem to like the Friday the 13th franchise. It's more of a fan thing. So, whatever. I can kind of see why the critics would hate it after a while, but I like the franchise. As for what other people thought of it, they gave it about on IMDb. It got a 5.7 out of 10, so it did about an average rating. And it pretty much got the same scores though: tens, sixes, sevens. I think somebody gave it a 4, eights, but fives. But if I had to rate it, but as for what I think about it, I don't think it's that bad. There's a because believe me, there's much worse of the Friday the 13th in the franchise than the one we just saw, well, the one I just reviewed. So this one I think is decent. If I had to rate it, I'm gonna give it a C plus. I don't think it's quite a good movie. I think it's just a step below um, the second one and a little bit below the first one. Um, but I would give this movie a C plus. I think it's a pretty decent movie. I feel like if I wouldn't watch this movie. Well, I mean, I technically did watch it again, but it's been a while. I would if I had to pick like a Friday the 13th I was gonna watch, though this wouldn't be one of my choices. But it is a significant movie for the fact that this was the first movie Jason gets his hockey mask too. So you're gonna have to give that take that into consideration. But as for the cast of this film, um, again, I'm just gonna go over you know um, the cast. I'm not and who they played. I'm not gonna say what other works they've done because I find that the video tends to drag when I do that. So this movie, for this movie, Dana Kimmel, Kim, Dana Kimmel plays Chris Higgins. Um, Paul Kratka played Rick. Tracy Savage played Debbie. Jeffrey Rogers played Andy. Um, Catherine Polks, or Kathleen Polks, I think it's actually how you say it. I don't know exactly how you say that name. Played Vera um, Sanchez. Larry Zerner played Shelley, but I gotta say, Larry Zerner did a really good job playing Shelley. I really wish Shelley would have been the main focus. Richard Booker played Jason Voorhees. I actually liked Richard Booker playing. No, sorry, Richard Brooker played Jason Voorhees. I actually liked him playing Jason Voorhees. I don't remember if he was the best Jason or not because it's been I haven't seen the other films. Well, it's been a while since I've seen the other films, so that's definitely something we could talk about. David Cadams played Chuck. Rachel Howard played Chili. Um, Marilyn Pocher played Pamela Voorhees. Nick Savage played Ali. Um, Gloria Charles played Fox. Kevin O'Brien played Loco. Cherry Mugens played Eden. Um, Steve Suskind played Harold. Perella Walter played Mrs. Sanchez, and David Willie played Abel. Um, and that's pretty much my so that's pretty much the cast. I did find that one thing I do want to note is this was the last movie too where the main character itself was a woman for the Friday the 13th series. Um, I'm trying to think if that's actually true because I'm thinking because yeah, the fourth one was a little kid, and then it's the same one for 4 through 6. Um, well, 7 though has a actually it's the last one until 7 actually. So I don't know. So I think but um, Jim Hopper notes though that there was actually more to the reason why Chris was so distant from relationships and stuff like that, and had to do with childhood drama resulting from sexual assault. So I thought that was a unique story. Um, but I did forget to mention how this film did and the actual theaters itself. That's pretty important. So this film, um, this was the first 3D film to receive a wide domestic release. Um, it opened to 1,779 screens, and of these screens, 813 of them were 3D capable. while the remainder consists of drive-in theaters which were unable to accommodate the format. So in order for non-3D theaters to screen the film, Paramount created a 7-week-long conversation process that cost $2 million. But as for the box but as for how it did in the box office, it made opening weekend it made $9,406,522. Let me say that again because I messed it up. 9,406. No, sorry. Let me say it again. $9,406,522. This movie made, which broke the horror opening record for the original Friday the 13th movie from 1980. It made it, but domestically it made a grand total of $36,690,067. And it out of all the grossing films of 1982, this placed number 21, facing strong competition from other high-profile releases such as Poltergeist, Creepshow, The Thin, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, Visiting Hour, Amityville 2, The Possession, Silent Rage, The Beast Within, Cat People, and Venom. And as of 2014, it still stands the fourth highest grossing film in the Friday the 13th series and the third best selling in ticket sales, with approximately 11,762,400 tickets being sold. It surpassed it is surpassed only by the 1980 original with 14,778,700 tickets, and Freddy vs. Jason with 13,701,900 tickets. And of 1992, the film stands as the 10th highest grossing R-rated film, and the second highest grossing horror film of 1982. The sixth largest box office opening of 1982, and if you adjust it for Infiltration, it's the 9th highest grossing slasher film of all time. So this movie is definitely one of the most successful of the Friday the 13th, which is pretty damn good actually. So that's pretty much my review of this video. Thank you guys for watching. Please make sure you guys leave your thoughts in the comments of what you thought of this video, and make sure you guys subscribe to this channel for more content and click on the bell so that way every time I upload a video you guys will get the notifications for it. Make sure you guys do the same thing for my CM Brothers YouTube channel. We'll be uploading a video on there tomorrow. And that's pretty much it, guys. Talk to you later.